And welcome back to Janky AF. Now today we're going to do just a little bit of a sort of drive and talk, a bit of a waffle, I believe they say in Britain, although by the time you get done with this you may have felt like you've been pancaked. And try not to beat you over the head with it here, but basically to get right to the point, I got COVID. So obviously when you get COVID, you got to quarantine, you got to stay at home, you can't see anybody, you can't do anything. And it just sort of got me thinking as I take a drive here, one of the few things I can do in my little mobile isolation box, how wonderful it is to be able to have a car and to be able to go for a drive while you're in periods of isolation or while you can't do anything else. It's an antidote to a restriction upon us or upon an individual. So I wanted to just sort of ruminate on that and pontificate on that. Now, as we pass, lovely that horse there, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, the other funny thing that's going on that kind of reminded me of this and falls in line with it is I was recently given a book by a good friend of mine, Lester, and shout out to Lester. And this book is Driving While Black by Gretchen Soren. Now, this was made into a PBS documentary by Rick Burns. Yes, Ken Burns has a brother named Rick Burns who is also a documentary filmmaker. He has a great movie on New York City, which you're all more than welcome to check out. And I haven't read this whole book, but I'm, a third of the way into it. Wonderful book, very well laid out, very well structured. And let me see if I can read the subtitle of this as I'm driving. African American Travel and the Road to Civil Rights. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, and forgive me if I do a poor job of it. But her main thrust of the book is that the automobile and the individual freedom of movement that it allowed was a crucial element of, Jim Crow era black life, particularly in the South, in that it allowed people to avoid, the sort of humiliating and constricting elements of the bus companies, the train companies, and even if you could ride those means of transportation, you were treated very disrespectfully as a second-class citizen, poor conditions, all sorts of, just really kind of nasty things. So the automobile, if you could buy a car, then you had wheels and you could buy, any car presumably that, a white fella could buy. And incidentally, Buicks were a highly sought after car, at least in the early days, because they offered a modicum of comfort and of reliability. Now, comfort was very important, and big cars are very important, especially early on, because there wasn't as much opportunities for lodging on the side of the road. And so you may have to find yourself sleeping in a car because you just frankly weren't welcome somewhere else. Reliability seems obvious, but also, it's not just a matter of convenience, it's a matter of safety and well-being, because if your car broke down and you weren't in a place where someone was willing to fix it for you, then you were, up shit's creek. So it's a fascinating book, and it really crystallizes something that would seem so obvious, but then put into this really stark light of something so obviously horrendous as segregation. It really shows what a weapon the automobile was. In this case, in advancing the freedom and autonomy and mobility and civil rights of a people. But then going back to something, a little bit more pedestrian, a little bit more, not quite as serious. I mean, obviously COVID is a serious matter, but my symptoms are fairly, not serious. I'm fine. But the sort of main point remains the same, in that me having this car, me being able to travel, is something that's very, very valuable and makes my life better in a very considerable way. And it gets me thinking about all the ways that vehicles help us, be more mobile and be more free, and how mobility in and of itself is a very, very important thing. I talked about this in the Ford Focus review with Carl in the Han Solo album release video, which you're all welcome to go watch. And I feel like a lot of, and I'm not criticizing any one YouTuber here or any, this is in no way, shape or form shade on anybody, but it just so happens that we all had, posters of Ferraris in our room when we were little. We didn't have posters of like Honda Civics and stuff like that and Toyota Corollas. Maybe some of us did. But I think that, and this gets back to my series, if you've watched my series, every car is a great car. Yes, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's something really, really meaningful in there for me, because any car that starts up and goes down the road with any modicum of, consistency or reliability is really, really great, because every car across the whole spectrum provides in essence the same thing, which is the ability to move somewhere. And I feel like we've almost lost that. I feel like with these $4 million hypercars that are tailor-made to buyers to try to increase profit margins for automakers, I feel like with the recent trend of cars being investments more than they are means of transportation, there's a lot of these trends where everything's sort of like floating upward. And it's almost as if we've forgotten what a car is, which is, essentially a motorized horse, or a motorized carriage and horse. And it's meant to be something that takes us from one place to another quicker than we could walk there, and with the ability to carry more stuff. And, in the horse world, obviously there's thoroughbreds and racehorses and all that, but I feel like there is a lot more parity in horses too, for especially when horses first came into being as means of transportation for, let's call it capitalist America. It seemed, I'm just guessing here, but it seemed like most horses were just like a horse, and obviously there was horses that performed better than others, but there wasn't like, an $800 horse and a $4 million horse or something like that, if you take out racing, obviously. And in cars now we have this just tremendous variation in all sorts of things, but mostly value. And that's fine. We should always be pushing the limits of technology, and we should always be seeing what an automobile can do. And if you look at, when I grew up in the Need for Speed era, like the Jaguar XG220, the Ford GT90, the Ital-designed Shigera is one that I feel like nobody ever talks about, the Isdera Commendatore 112i. All these cars were just absolutely incredible, like breathtaking, beautiful, like mind-boggling, and they had a real sense of like mystique to them. These one-off creations, a lot of times from the sort of brain of one person. So in no way am I poo-pooing that. But I think on the opposite end of things, we should lift up the everyday car. The car that's just a trusty, dependable companion that helps us achieve and do all these things, like taking this drive right now. It's getting me out into the wilderness. I'm looking at the beautiful scenery and landscape around me. It's allowing myself to clear my head and get like a little change of pace and see something different and rejuvenate myself as I am cast off from the rest of the world. So I just wanted to sort of talk about that a little and reflect on it and ramble a bit. So I hope maybe that's food for thought here. Now, of course, we are driving my 2002 Volkswagen Jetta. I've just started to release a couple of videos on this vehicle, and I'll be releasing more, and we will do a full road test eventually. Unfortunately, I'm down one camera right now because we ran over it in the Ford Focus review, which maybe you saw. So I got more cameras coming. And so that's why I say every car is a great car. Freedom, mobility, these are things we should not take for granted. And I don't think that whatever it may be, a Toyota Corolla or a Ford Fusion or a Buick LeSabre, I think every car has personality and every car has, character. And it's just up to us to try to find that and see that, instead of always looking for the shiniest, fastest, most ostentatious object that is, lusted after by other people, and so therefore we lust after it ourselves. We should seek to find out, to find our own sense of style and things that we gravitate toward ourselves. And the last thing I'll say, obviously I'm also a big fan of toilets. I paint toilets. You can check out my website, jankypainting.com, see the toilets I've made. And in a lot of ways a car is like a toilet too. They're stalwarts. They're just dependable steeds. They're these emblems of being able to go about and do our business, and I mean that in more ways than one. And, if you gotta unload your drawers in an expedient way and in a time-sensitive manner, you don't really care what toilet is sitting under you. You kind of just gotta go. And conversely, you should appreciate every toilet that's sitting under you. And so in that vein of thinking, in that spirit, I appreciate every car that I can get in and turn the wheel and drive down the road. So that's what I've been thinking about. The holiday season is upon us. Hopefully I can get this out before Christmas. And so in that spirit, Janky do thank you to everyone. Be safe, be healthy, be happy. Appreciate the many blessings which you have as you try to venture forth and create a more abundant world for yourself. Appreciate those whose shoulders you stand upon to arch forth into the unknown and try to make a better, more holistic world for you and those around you. All right, so with that, Janky do thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.